Oh, hey, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the Efficiency Bitch podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Leone. This podcast is dedicated to all the women out there who are aspiring to have a career while raising a family. And bitch? Well, that's more than a name and even an attitude. We use it as an acronym. It's for bank, inbox, time, connection, and harmony. Each episode is labeled according to the correct topic so that you can efficiently find the topic that you're looking for. I'm here to tell you, you can have your cake and eat it too. The trick is finding efficient ways to get through the have-tos so that you can make room for your best life. I can show you how. Let's get started. Hey, and welcome to the Efficiency Bitch podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Leone. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Beehive. I'm so glad you're here. If you've been around a while, welcome back. This is going to be an episode all about harmony. I mean, this is what it's all about. It's all about that bow that puts it all together, makes it all worth it. What we're all striving for is harmony so that we can live our best life. And I have a fantastic guest here today to talk to all of us, myself included, about stress, about the way stress impacts our body and what we can do to help. So please welcome my guest, Gala. Hi, how are you? I'm so glad you're here.
I am great, Melissa, and I'm really glad to be here and be included in your beehive for this episode.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's start a little bit with who you are, where you come from, and how you do life.
So I am an acupuncturist and a naturopath, Dr. Gala Gorman. I'm in Hilton Head, South Carolina. So just a few minutes drive to the beach here. So I made my way to this medicine over a kind of long journey. And I really believe that our bodies are designed as self-healing mechanisms. And we're always counseled or coached along those lines. And some of the methods that we end up adopting make it harder for our bodies to do what they're naturally designed to do. So I am all about helping women, particularly. That's where my heart is, but women particularly support their bodies in their natural healing.
Yeah, that's amazing. It resonates for me because I am a woman, so that's one. But two is that we do take on life, both mentally and physically, different than our male counterparts. And so there are things that we have to know about our bodies. There's things we have to know about our mental health, things we have to know about our hormones. They're so different at every phase of our life. I'm 42 right now, going through hormonal changes that I have only read about, right? And you know when you know that these things are happening. So I love that you're specifically focused for women because we are complex creatures and there's a lot to unpack there. So how did you get started? Where'd this come from?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because a lot of times people will seem a little miffed, if you will, that I talk about helping women and not focus on sort of everybody, because truly, everybody could use a little help, right? But it's interesting because the studies that are done tend to be done on men or primarily male cohort, because they need to have a group of people that are really homogenous, fairly similar in structure. And because as women, our hormones are constantly changing, and that changes what's going on in our body so dramatically, it's really hard to study women. So, the research studies just rarely spend much time. And that's why when you'll have a doctor say, well, the science doesn't prove this out, or the studies don't demonstrate this, you want to really past that initial barrier, because
Mhm.
if the studies aren't studying primarily women and primarily women at your stage of sort of hormonal balance,
Mhm.
then they haven't studied anything that would really be that effective for you and what you're dealing with.
That's so interesting. I didn't realize that it makes so much sense when you say it,
Yeah.
because you're right. I mean, the hormone levels of the females in this house are all very different. There's several of us, and they're all, I got a preteen and a young one and myself, right? We're all at very different phases
Yeah.
of those things. So it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that. And I- I'll tell you the truth, I get a little bit of pushback too, because my book says how ambitious women can have it all without doing it all. And people always say, well, how come men can't have it all? And I was like, look, we just want what you have. That's
Yeah.
all we're after.
Yeah. I find that really fascinating too. And I get it. I was, before I ventured into what I'm doing now, in my first career, if you will, I was a CPA. I still am a CPA. I just haven't practiced for 25 years now. But I had a male partner who I just dearly loved, and he was fantastic. And we would still have a great relationship if I didn't live thousands of miles away, probably. But I knew that there were certain situations where it was just easier for, the type of clientele we were dealing with and that sort of thing, for him to take the lead. And
Mhm.
as a business person, like, just generally speaking, I didn't really care. Like, I just
Mhm.
wanted to get the job done and have the clients be happy. And so I think that women generally, if we've decided we're going to like pursue the career path and want to be successful, like not just at home with our families, but also out in the world, we've kind of assessed the landscape and said, okay, what do I need to do to like navigate the territory that I'm dealing with? And I don't think men have to do that.
No.
There's things they have to do, certainly, but
Yeah.
they don't have to do that. There are things that you just take for granted that are not taken for granted as a female. And
In so many ways. Yeah.
yeah, in your pre document that you sent to me, one of the lines said, when you hear that word bitch, what do you
Mhm.
think? Like, how does that resonate with you? And what it reminded me of is that, women who are powerful and really, you know, sort of asserting themselves are often um, labeled bitchy,
Mhm.
right? And that's very common. So when we hear the word bitch, we have to basically come to terms with it. It's like, okay, if you want to think of me as bitchy, like, I just have to accept that because I can't control how you perceive me. But on the other hand, I don't have to tone myself down. I don't have to be less than who I am to make you not think I'm bitchy. That's like,
That's so
like
true.
the way you see me is not my problem.
Yep.
So,
And it still can sting. I
yeah.
have I've trademarked the name efficiency bitch. The word bitch is attached to my name in many places on the internet, in podcasting and trademark offices. It's all over the place. And it still can sting if I'm called a bitch with the right tone, in the right attitude, in the right, by a
Yeah, it's
man.
not done in that, like, really
It
warm and
Yep.
like, oh yes, you're the efficiency bitch. Love
Yeah.
you.
It's a unique word that has some really specific ability to suck power out of people. And
Mhm.
so I get it. And I think, as we can go into a whole marketing conversation about this too. But when you are a business owner and you are trying to put out a message into the world, regardless of what it is, if you're offering a service, if you're writing a book, if you're doing whatever, you have to know exactly who you're talking to. And then everybody else is welcome to listen. But I'm specifically talking to a specific group of people. I'm not asking anybody not to pay attention, but I can't talk to everybody. Otherwise I'll land with nobody. Right. So
Yeah.
it is a complicated thing. So the people who listen to the Efficiency Bitch podcast are busy women. They're women who most of the time are juggling many things. It may be caring for elderly parents or a corporate job and a side hustle or kids and all of the above. There's usually a lot of things going on, and we're always looking for those efficient ways to get better. The H chapter, the H podcast category is all about harmony and those ways that we can live life, have it all without doing it all, have your cake and eat it too, and have what our male counterparts have had for so long of a career and a family and not ever feeling like you have to burn the candle at both ends. I mean, the analogies go on and on. So let's talk about stress and how toxic it is and what you're seeing from a medical perspective in that space.
So, I wrote my book, What's Your Kryptonite, and it was published last year. And it had been in the works. That was not necessarily the title of it, but it had been in the works for a few years. But I lost my sister to cancer the year before, and she had been struggling for a number of years. But my sister was the quintessential superwoman in her world. She was single mom to 2 kids. She ran her own business, a professional woman. She had decided, she was a CPA and had decided to go back to school to get her law degree because it was something she had always wanted to do. And she, was pursuing that. And then on top of everything else, she had this little farmette, like 4+ acres out in Texas. And she had rescue horses and all kinds of animals running around.
She sounds amazing.
Holy moly. And I would talk to her. The last couple of years of her life, she was so sick that she really could not get on the phone and have a lengthy conversation with me. And it was really, like I lost her years before I physically lost her. But when I could get her on the phone, she'd be like, I just love sitting on my porch and looking out over like the farmland. And there was this pond in her backyard where like all the cows from the neighboring, she didn't have cows, but the neighboring cows would congregate around this little pond. And so she just loved it out there. She really loved her life. She had her hands in so many different things, but she literally bit off more than she could chew. Like there was no time left for her and for taking care of herself. And when she was finally ultimately diagnosed, she had kicked the can down the road for so long that it was pretty dire. And so one of the things I really counsel women on is not suppressing symptoms. So for anyone, stress manifests in unique ways. Like the way I like to describe it to patients is that your body has its weak points. And so when you're stressed, the stress is going to show up. It's going to essentially opportunistically take advantage of your weak point. So for some people that is, getting a cold or a flu, lung issues. For some people, it's a skin eruption. For some people, it's, aches and pains, headaches, not being able to sleep. There's just all sorts of ways that it shows up. But women with this idea that they have to keep all the balls in the air at all costs, rather than recognizing the symptoms as a sign that they need to slow it down, hit the pause button, and, even just take a few days to do something to kind of, if you think of an Instapot, right? It's got the little valve, and in a perfect world, we wait and let the valve just release on its own, and eventually it will, come down and it'll turn itself over. But when we're in a hurry, what do? We give it a few minutes and then we go turn the thing and let the steam and the pressure dissipate quickly. And so there are times when it would be really nice to just hit the pause button for several weeks and let the steam and the pressure dissipate naturally. But when you don't feel like you've got several weeks, at least take several days and just recognize that what you do for yourself in just relieving that pressure naturally, as opposed to suppressing symptoms with a pain reliever or some other similar pill to pop, will really go a long way. And it goes beyond the physical benefits. You're also sending messages to your psyche, essentially, spiritually, that I'm important, and I prioritize myself. And there's something that goes on emotionally and mentally, spiritually, when we say, you know what? Yep, everybody else is a big priority, but I'm number one. So
yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, I'm mother of 3, business owner, author, podcaster. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, I do this all the time. I bite off more than I can chew constantly. Anybody will tell you. My mother, probably the loudest, will tell you that I do it. And I mean, I write about this in my book, right? Like, I was super mom, and I'm way better today, like a lot better today than I was many years ago, when I was kind of at the peak of that. But I'll tell people, I write it in the book, Supermom tried to kill me. I tried to be everything to everyone all the time. And I was smacked with skin issues and digestive issues and menstrual cycle issues and depression and head migraines. Like, oh my gosh, the migraines were, and it was every day I was getting these types of things. And once I realized that I couldn't do it all, right? That I could have it all, but I just couldn't do it all, it really started to shift. And I did a lot of different things that you've mentioned, like acupuncture was certainly one of those things. I learned to turn my computer off, which is difficult. If I had said that in 2019 or 2018, nobody worked from home. I mean, I did, but most people didn't work from home back then. And today, a lot of people are still working from home. And I talk to a lot of people who say it's really hard to turn it off. I'm always at work. And I've found I need to close my computer and say, I'm done for the day. And I say those words out loud and I walk away from the computer and I close the door. Because if you don't, it will be really easy to work every day, all day. Constantly.
Yeah, I just released a video and a post on my website about the effects of blue light and blue screens on our health. And it's not small. So you really have to think about, one, how you're going to mitigate the effects because they're real. But then also, at what point can you just say that's enough screen time today? And so the computer is definitely something that we all struggle with, because now we have tablet computers that go with us everywhere, right?
Yeah. Our phones are really not phones. They're computers with an app on them that can sometimes call people. My children, 2 of them, have, quote, phones that are not connected to anything except Wi-Fi. They're just for games, but they call them their phones. And I think, how funny that they
Yeah.
refer to these little devices as phones, but they don't call anybody. They've never once used that thing to make an actual phone
Well,
call.
and in foreign countries, they use WhatsApp and they actually do call people, and all they need is their their Wi-Fi.
The Wi-Fi. Yeah, that's true. So what are some of the best ways to manage this stress so that it doesn't become toxic? Because we all have stress. It's not going away. I mean,
Right.
mine's not going away. I like what I do. I want to stay busy. I'm not giving up a kid. So what are some of the ways to manage it?
Yeah. Giving up one wouldn't really help anyway, right? You never know which one's going to cause the most stress at any given week, right?
Absolutely.
So as I mentioned earlier, the most important thing is that you recognize when the pressure is about to blow, right? And the way we recognize that pressure is through the symptoms. So it sounds like you had symptoms popping up every which way to Sunday, and you kept whack-a-moling the symptoms, right? Like, I got to get through one more day. So how am I going to manage this migraine? Like, how am I going to cover up these skin issues? And so I challenge you, rather than playing whack-a-mole with the symptoms, to look at the symptoms and say, wow, how much of that symptom could be related to stress? And then a lot of times it's less emotional stress and more some sort of toxicity related stress. And emotional stress is just like the light on a fuse that's already sitting there kind of smoldering, but all it takes is a little flick and it's off to the races. So if you feel like your reactions are disproportionate to what you've actually got going on, then you really want to find somebody that can help you get to the bottom of what might be going on beneath the surface.
And you said toxic stress versus emotional stress. Can you differentiate those two?
So the way I define toxic stress, so there's several versions of stress, let's just call it that. There's a man named Selye who's kind of considered the father of stress. He coined the phrase the stress response. And there's eustress, eustress, and then distress. And so eustress is the good stress. It's the stress we all thrive on. We all love a challenge. Anybody who's done a race and really challenged themselves. I'm about to embark on a big hiking adventure in Europe, and I'm super excited about it. And there probably will be times that eustress turns to distress, but it's mostly eustress, right? And so eustress isn't the problem. The problem is when we have taken on too many things that have caused us what would normally be good stress, but together they add up to distress, right? So distress is when our sort of normal stress becomes essentially unmanageable. Now we're starting to feel anxiety, we have headaches, we can't sleep, those sorts of things, heart palpitations, that sort of thing. And so that's the point in time to say, whoa, 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 time to reverse course. I need to slow down, hit the pause button, and take a big picture view of everything I've got going on, and try to figure out which one of these things was the straw that broke the camel's back, or do I just, maybe I've got 10 plates I'm spinning and I love all 10 plates, but I just simply can't spin all 10 plates at once without, losing sleep over it. Right. Which means basically I've got to say, okay, these 4 plates, even though I love them, these 4 plates have got to be set aside, at least for the time being, right?
Yeah.
So that's how you manage distress. Now, if we don't set those 4 plates aside and dial it back to a manageable amount of stress, and so we can keep it in the eustress realm, now stress becomes toxic. And so as stress escalates, it starts to manifest. Dis-ease becomes disease. So stress, the stress response in the body, think of it, the way I usually describe it is your body does not know the difference between running from an actual lion and a lion that you're just perceiving could be in the bushes. Okay. So when you get stressed to the point of kind of overwhelm, your body has the same reaction it would have if you are out in the outback in Africa and the Jeep just drove off and you see a lion across the field and you're thinking, holy, what do I do now? Right. And obviously you're preparing to run, right? You're like waiting for the lion to see you. And it's like, okay, I got a few steps ahead of them. I better get on with it. Right. So, that's your body's response. Your body's response is stress, danger, prepare to run from the lion, all the other things that I normally would be taken care of, rest and repair and digestion and all the things that make us feel good and allow us to keep operating on all cylinders. Half of that goes offline so that we can run from the lion. And so imagine that that is happening essentially 24/7 for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months. Now your body has set aside all that rest and repair for an extended period of time. And I mean, our liver regenerates every 6 months. If we didn't do rest and repair for 6 months, what do you think our liver's going to look like? So, I just think the advice, if I've got advice to give your hive, is to really take it seriously when you go from eustress to distress and you start seeing signs of dis-ease. Super easy to fix it at that point. Really, it's not that hard. It does require adjustments. Certainly I had a new patient that I'm working with, and I talked to her a couple of weeks ago and gave her my initial results of the scans that I ran on her. And I gave her a few tweaks and I said, this is your homework for the next couple of weeks until you come in for your appointment 2 weeks from now. And so she came in today and I had met her for the first time in person today. And she said that just with the initial tweaks that I had given her, that she had already lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks. And that she was already starting to feel better and feel hopeful. And I hadn't even put her on my protocol yet. So, it's just, there are definitely lifestyle adjustments that will need to be made, and they work. If you figure out the right things that are going to work for you and your body, they work. And that's kind of the tricks, because we tend to hear something like on a show like this, and we hear something and we think, oh, I'll try that. Yeah. And then it doesn't work for us. And it's because that was not the thing that was going to meet all the tumblers in what's particularly going on with you. And that's why sometimes it can help to talk to a professional that can help you sort of sort through all the options and figure out exactly what's going on in your individual situation. But the most important thing I can share is that you just do not want to minimize it initially, and just stick your head in the sand and start, I'm sure that, and maybe you shared in your book, but I'm sure you used a lot of symptom suppressors during that period of time where you were trying to manage all those symptoms and keep all the balls in the air.
Mostly alcohol or Zoloft. Those were like the best painkillers around for me at the time. I'm happy to say neither of those are in my life anymore. But yeah, I mean, you're just trying to get by, right? And you're just trying to make it stop being so hard because there's a lot to do. And I didn't want to waste time. I mean, at the time I was living in a really small town in Arizona. It took a long time to get to a doctor. It took a long time to get an appointment with a doctor. It was like, there was so much, but it literally took exhaustion to make me recognize that something had to shift. And once that happened, I was really able to figure it out and prioritize it in a way that, I mean, I'm still busy. Don't get me wrong. Like I still work my butt off all the time, but what I also recognize now, and I didn't have the technical words I think that you used with moving from one form of stress into the next and then eventually into disease, is I can do all the things, but if an added element like the last week of school, which I'm in right now with my kids, shows up, it adds a whole other layer because they're in half days every single day. And then there's an award this day and there's a party this day. And then don't forget this. And like when you add another layer of something that's already stressful to a full plate, right? That's when it starts to get out of control. And those are the things that I've started to recognize. I'm still not perfect at it. But then let's say you have a sick parent or a sick child, or somebody gets in a fender bender, or I mean, little things that happen all the time, right? I mean,
or you catch a cold.
Oh,
you
gosh,
catch a
that just
cold
happens
yourself.
Yeah.
That might have been just a no big deal thing. But when your immune system's already barely hanging on by its fingernails, and now any pathogen kind of makes its way into your space, now all of a sudden you're really sick.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, gosh, when I was in that space, I was getting sinus infection after sinus infection after sinus infection. I couldn't get it to go away. So then I had surgery to fix my sinuses, but like that wasn't really the problem. And it's interesting. And I learned a lot about stress because I had no choice but to learn about it. I wish I had been a little bit more proactive before it kicked my ass completely, because I lost a lot of time, spent some good amount of money. I almost lost my marriage over it, quite honestly, because I was in such a icky place myself. It was really hard for him to help me or care for me at that point because I was in such a bad place. So I say that, and I'm so candid with that information, because if I had heard somebody say that to me when I was in it, it might have made me think, okay, maybe I actually need to address this and think about it. But I still am stuck with what to do to make it better. I mean, everybody will say, reduce your stressors. Like, how do you reduce your stressors? For me, it's, I hire help. I call somebody to come over and watch the kids, whether I pay them with food or hugs or money, like figure out a way to get somebody to support you in some areas that you need help with. And then I'm all about time management. I am going to find 5 minutes today to make tomorrow 10 minutes faster. And then it's one bite at a time. Reduce those levels of things. Cause like I said, my business isn't going anywhere. My kids aren't going anywhere. This is what it is. This is the bed that I made. I gotta lay in it now. But you got to find ways to make it smarter, right? And you've got to find ways to make it more efficient. Otherwise, the stressors may just completely eat you alive.
Yeah, I think the way I put it, and this may not be a popular, I don't know, philosophy, if you will, but when you let it go to the point where it escalates to disease, not just dis-ease, disease, and you end up with some crazy diagnosis. Okay. And it could be any diagnosis, and we all know what those are, right? At that point, the financial burden, the time burden of doctor's appointments, the potential of not being able to work at all while you're going through some crazy toxic treatment. If you just even allow yourself a moment, and I don't want you to dwell on that because that's not going to help, but just allow yourself a moment, and you don't have to look very far. We all have people in our world that have had to face that reality, right? And so you don't have to look very far. You just look there for a minute and say, by some grace, that has not been me. And I'm going to do my best to make sure it never is me. And the way I have to do that is to disappoint some people right now so that we don't get all massively disappointed down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Those can be really difficult things to go through. And I think the first piece is awareness, recognizing that there's something going on, and your symptom of not being able to sleep, or not having a regular period, or not having normal digestion, like those things are a symptom of something. They're not, they're not just there for fun. And I hope that if you're listening to this and this is the message that you needed to hear today, that you'll go out and find different ways to reduce some stress for yourself today, even if it's just opening the valve on the pressure cooker just for a second, just to let a little bit out. It goes a really long way. I plan to do that this weekend. It's Memorial Day weekend. I am going to hang out with my kids. They have no more school, so they get to release their pressure valve tomorrow at noon. It's their last day of school.
The whole family gets to release the valve this weekend.
Yep. So we are going to spend 3 full days home at the swimming and playing. And that's all we're doing. I'm not working. No one's going to any sporting events. And that does not happen very often in our home, but that is the plan. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'd love if you could share maybe where people could connect with you or continue a conversation.
So my website is drgala.com. That's just drgala.com. And on my homepage, you can find a quick link to find my book on Amazon, or at the bottom in the footer are all the little badges for the different social media platforms. Any one of those that's your platform of choice, you can find a link down there. And then there's also a little form. I publish a newsletter every Sunday and just share my current thoughts, what I've maybe experienced recently. And so you can sign up for that newsletter as well. There's a form down there to do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Gala. We'll be sure to put all of that information in the show notes. And thank you so much for stopping by today. We're so glad to have you part of the Beehive. If this is your first time listening, please make sure that you go and follow so you don't miss any more. If you've been around a while, then I look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, I'm your host, Melissa Leon. See ya. Well, that wraps it up. Thank you so much for listening. If you're new around here, please be sure to leave us a review on any podcast platform you're listening to. And you can always reach out to me to let me know what topics you're interested in hearing about, or maybe telling me someone you think would be great for the show. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at EfficiencyBee. Until next time, see ya.